Welcome to episode 6 of Beyond the Walls, the series where I cover current hot topics on Embark Studios games, the finals and the in-development Ark Raiders, their communities, and things like Easter egg discoveries. Before I jump into this episode, I just want to mention that today marks exactly 5 years to the day since I made my first video about Embark Studios games. So thanks for taking the time to join me on this adventure, and I guess it's kind of fitting that I'm going to talk about both Ark Raiders and the finals today, including possible connections between the two games. Anyhow, before that, in this episode, I'm going to kick things off with a quick overall look at the rate of updates to the finals since the game launched, to get an idea if the rate of updates has increased or decreased over time. I'll also discuss the community's reaction to all the recent Ark Raiders news, cover some questions I've seen about things like the upcoming Ark Raiders playtest, and how participants for that playtest will be chosen. Then, as I alluded to before, I'm going to dive into a popular lore topic that's been floating around for a while, which is, do the finals and Ark Raiders occur in the same game universe? And I'll wrap up with a few updates about some Easter eggs in the finals, including a new find. Let's start though by coming back to something I showed back in Season 1 of the finals. Back in February, I showed you this graph which displays the cumulative patch notes word count for the finals over time. And here's what it looks like today. A little more detail for those of you who haven't seen this before. Basically, this line shows the total word count for patch notes for the finals released by Embark Studios, accumulating since the game launched. I think we can use this as a crude way to show the quantity of changes Embark Studios have made to the game over time, as well as the pace of those changes. You can see the major updates at the start of each of the 3 seasons so far, along with the mid-season updates for Season 1 here and for Season 2. Season 3 hasn't had a major mid-season update, and that's possibly because a lot of Embark's team took their extended summer leave during this time, but instead the start of Season 3 included large changes to the game, some of which, like Terminal Attack becoming the only ranked mode, weren't particularly well received. One of the things that really stands out about the graph is how linear it is overall, likely showing that Embark have been updating the game at a pretty steady cadence. Aside from the quieter periods leading up to the major updates, only the Christmas break shortly after the game launched really stands out as a significant period where no updates were made. Maybe Embark should have considered announcing the game's launch at the Game Awards in early December, but actually launching it in early January so that the Christmas vacation period wouldn't affect updates to the game so early in its life. I know it's a bit of a moot point either way, but perhaps it's something Embark might consider differently with the launch of future titles. I think overall though, the rate of change to the game, if we base it on the patch notes word count, has been pretty consistent. Maybe we'll come back to look at this again down the track. Moving on, it was of course a big last week for Ark Raiders, with a teaser trailer shown at Gamescom and the announcement of a closed public tech test for the game which will run from October 24 to 27, as well as the news that the game's pricing has changed from free-to-play to being a premium game with around a $40 price tag, as well as the release date for the game now being sometime next year. I talked about all those things and a lot more in my video about Ark Raiders, which is linked above. With more than a week past since those announcements, we have had the opportunity to see the reaction from the community. Probably as we might expect, the reaction to the change from a free-to-play game has been mixed, with some members of the community disappointed that the game won't be free, and others thinking that this is a good move because the developers will be able to provide us more content included for free and allow the game to have less focus on microtransactions and cosmetics, as well as act as a financial deterrent to cheaters. Having been fortunate enough to watch Ark Raiders gameplay during the pre-Gamescom press event, and because I can't show you that gameplay, I guess this is going to be a bit of a trust me bro moment, I definitely think it came across as a $40 type of game rather than a free-to-play one, and I don't agree with the few comments I've seen saying that putting a price tag on Ark Raiders will kill the game. I mean, you could use that argument against any premium game, and it just doesn't stand up to any real scrutiny. If the game is good and marketed well, it will sell. It's as simple as that. Sure, some people who only followed the game because it was free to play might have been put off by the change to premium, but to be realistic, the game hasn't had a huge amount of marketing in its current form as a PvPvE extraction shooter, so there's plenty of room for its following to grow. I've also seen some confusion about the playtest. My understanding is that a closed public tech test means that the number of players will be limited, but the public moniker means that those playing will be able to share their gameplay and opinions on the game. And by tech test, I think this will mean that some features will be missing from the game so that Embark Studios can focus on things like core optimization and making sure that the primary game elements are working well. My assumption is that gameplay and the game environment will probably be the main focus, and that things like the trading, the UI, quests, playtests and that kind of thing might be held back a bit. Also, I know some of the community have shared their disappointment that participants in the closed test will be chosen at random rather than on a first-come, first-served basis. It's understandable, especially for those that signed up to play the game as far back as late 2021. However, I think that Embark may have an underlying reason for this. For the playtest, they'll want to get as much unbiased gameplay data and feedback from the community as possible, and that'll probably mean that they want a purely random group of players. If they filled the playtest on a first-come, first-served basis, then that immediately introduce inherent biases within the group, either from people that signed up for the game on the basis of it being mostly PvE, or simply because those people were super keen from the start, or because they've been waiting so long to play. And the only way for them to remove those biases is to make the selection random. Of course, that's not going to placate the disappointment of players that miss out, especially if they've been wanting to play the game for a long time, but I can see how it will be better for the game overall. Last on the Arc Raiders front, I'm going to talk about whether Arc Raiders and the finals share the same game universe, and why the answer to that question isn't as simple as it might seem at first glance. This is a lore topic that has been doing the rounds amongst the communities for both games, as well as being discussed by a few content creators. So where did this idea come from? The seed of the idea first sprung into life following the first proper teaser trailer for the finals back in August 2022, when this inflatable flamingo appeared well hidden amongst a cloud of destruction, and flamingos had already been seen as one of the species of wildlife shown in the first Arc Raiders trailer. So we started to wonder if there might be some sort of connection between Embark Studios' two games. Then in mid-2023, it was noticed in the finals official brand guide, which is part of the game's press kit, that it says, "The finals is the greatest virtual game show on the planet with a large global fan base. The finals is a window to a bigger world in which the game show is set, consisting of the meat space and the virtual world, but most people spend their time in the virtual world. This takes place about 75 years in the future. So the finals is set around the year 2100. In fact, the number 2095 was spotted by content creator Spear in one of the finals lore vignettes. So it could be exactly that year, but let's call it 2100 for simplicity." The obvious question then was, what does the meat space look like? And with Arc Raiders being set in a dystopian world threatened by the mysterious Arc machines, people started to wonder if the Arc Raiders world with humans living underground could actually be the meat space for the finals. It's a narrative that's quite closely aligned to that of the movie The Matrix, with its humans living in a simulated reality while machines control the real world, harvesting humans for energy. It seems like a reasonable narrative, albeit one that I think isn't particularly original given the storyline of The Matrix. Anyhow, I think from this you can see what the concept is and perhaps why it might appeal to some people. So are there any links between the two games so far, aside from flamingos? There are a couple. On this page, which was on the original Arc Raiders website but is currently no longer linked from the homepage, an Arc rollerbot is shown, and behind it is the logo of energy company Dyson from the finals, but it's inverted. Now, it could simply be a reused asset, but there's also another one. This logo that currently appears on the Arc Raiders website next to the catchphrase "Enlist Resist" also appears in the finals as a tiny logo on the minimum coverage charm. It's for a sponsor named Ranzio, which we really know nothing about yet. Again, it could just be a reused asset, but from what we've seen from the finals Easter eggs so far, there are seldom coincidences within the finals when it comes to hidden details. Although that hidden flamingo in the first teaser trailer for the finals could also just have been the Embark devs' way of acknowledging that the release of Arc Raiders had been pushed back and that of the finals brought forward. But if these things do suggest a link between the game's worlds, let's consider what type of link that might be. Importantly, during the pre-Gamescom press event, we learned a single significant piece of info that kind of scuppers the possibility of Arc Raiders being the meat space for the finals. We watched an internal video that Embark used to showcase the game to new members of their team, and that told us Arc Raiders is set on Earth several hundred years into the future, following a mass exodus of humans into space due to the ecological collapse. So this immediately places the present time for the finals and Arc Raiders at least a couple of hundred years apart, if not more, so they can't relate like that Matrix-like simulation and real-world narrative would have them. Having said that, maybe all isn't lost with this idea of a link between the games. Here's a snapshot of how it could look. We know that the finals is run by an AI system and that there are multiple sponsors involved with the game show. Perhaps in the intervening several hundred years between 2100 and when Arc Raiders occurs, the AI from the finals is developed much further so it can start to run intelligent machines machines in the meat space, perhaps even for military use. And eventually those machines become smart enough to go rogue and wage war on humanity, in the process causing the ecological collapse that drives humans off the planet, except for the few that remain to become raiders fighting against the Ark machines that orbit and roam the planet. With a gap of a few hundred years between those times, we might expect to see a few traces of the finals time period in Ark Raiders. So for instance, a couple of logos from the finals or variations on them might be spotted, or some derelict artifacts or machines from the same time. I think this would actually provide us with a much more interesting narrative than a straight Matrix-like dual reality situation, because as well as completing typical extraction shooter type tasks, we could also then slowly piece together the history that occurred during the couple of hundred years leading up to Ark Raiders' present day, kind of like some sort of retro exploration and discovery adventure game hidden within the Ark Raiders environment. So I think we can rule out the direct link between the games, but there might be some link between them that's more subtle. Okay, let's wrap up things with a few Easter egg updates for the finals. Firstly, the dolphin charm that is still waiting to be triggered on the Sys Horizon map in order to release this charm to the community. About a week ago, Embark co-founder, chief content officer and executive producer for the finals, Rob Runison, mentioned in the finals channel of the official Discord for the game that the Easter egg was almost triggered the previous week, saying that 6 out of 7 steps were completed. He also wrote that you guys will trigger it any day, week, decade now, probably without even knowing why. But the patch is ready when you do. And when asked, we can't trigger it in a custom match, right? He wrote, you actually can. Well, I think at least we'll try tomorrow. And then just in the last day, confirmed that we can now trigger it in a private match, which might make it a bit easier to solve. He also wrote that once it's triggered, he will make sure that the charm's free for everyone. And when questioned about that, he wrote, it's one of the most legendary charms in the history of gaming, so of course everyone should get it for free. I know a lot of the Easter egg hunters are still trying to work it out, so hopefully it shouldn't take too much longer. Rob also jumped into the Easter egg channel on the Discord to write about the number 22 disc Easter egg that can be found on the Kyoto map, writing, by the way, I wonder what this means. Perhaps there is something more linked to this. Not sure, but I would be a bit disappointed on myself if there wasn't anything else connected to this. And this is a small thing linked to the big hunt in 3 ways, but it is also linked to a super silly in real life thing, and some in-game lore things too, but primarily it was added to the game to share some love to you guys, to all fellow game devs that pour their souls and hearts into the games they work on. And then he said, oh, I want to tell you, gah. I think Rob might struggle with not leaking things to us sometimes. So there's some sort of link to the main Easter egg hunt with these discs, but we don't know what it is, although it doesn't necessarily sound like there might be some big in-game Easter egg based on them or anything like that. Lastly, you might recall from episode 3 of Beyond the Walls that we had found 2 drawings of New Zealand fantails, or P Waka Waka as they're also known, that had been hidden on the Kyoto map by Embark's level designer Midas Delat, following a recent vacation to New Zealand. The first 2 found were up on the northern hillside amongst the bamboo and also inside the top of the bell tower, but we knew there was a third one somewhere, and while a group of us were searching for it in a private match a couple of days ago, Hunter Cathartic found it hidden in the corner of the basement under the stables building near the entrance area of the map. So the Easter egg hunting for these little guys is now complete. Before I go, as I mentioned in a previous video, I've set up channel memberships for my channel recently, and I'd like to thank the first 3 members for joining. Your support is much appreciated. Thanks for watching this episode of Beyond the Walls to the end. Do the usual YouTube business if you want to see more videos from me from now on. Give a like or comment as you see fit, and enjoy the rest of your day. Kia kaha, stay strong.
Everybody knows the world ain't right. Down on your knees, get up and fight.